I never thought I would become the villain in my own brother's story. I never imagined that the hands that used to protect him when we were children would one day be the same hands that signed away his future. If you had told me 10 years ago that I would betray the person who trusted me more than anyone else in this world, I would have called you insane. But here I am, sitting in a half-empty house with nothing but silence and the memories of what I destroyed. My name is Daniel Harris, and this is my confession about how I cheated my brother out of everything and lost my peace after that night. They say guilt is the heaviest burden a person can carry. I used to think that was just something people said to make themselves feel better about doing the right thing. I was wrong. Guilt does not just weigh on you. It crawls inside your chest, wraps itself around your lungs, and squeezes a little tighter every single day until breathing becomes a conscious effort. Every morning when I wake up, the first thing I see is not the sunrise through my window. The first thing I see is my brother's face the moment he realized what I had done. That image has been burned into my mind like a brand, and no amount of time, no amount of success, no amount of anything has been able to erase it. Let me take you back to the beginning because you need to understand how we got here. You need to understand who Marcus and I were before I became this person. Maybe then you will understand how someone can love their brother with everything they have and still destroy him. Marcus and I grew up in a modest house in the suburbs of Manchester. Our father, Robert Harris, was a self-made man who had built a small but successful construction company from nothing. He started with a single truck and a handful of tools, and by the time we were teenagers, Harris Construction was one of the most respected names in commercial building in the north of England. Our mother, Helen, was the heart of our home. She was the one who kept the peace when our father worked late nights, the one who made sure we never forgot that family came first. Growing up, Marcus and I were inseparable. He was 3 years younger than me, and from the moment my parents brought him home from the hospital, I felt this overwhelming need to protect him. I remember standing by his crib when I was just 4 years old, watching him sleep, and thinking that I would never let anything bad happen to him. That was the promise I made to myself. That was the promise I would eventually shatter into 1,000 pieces. We were different in so many ways, Marcus and I. I was the ambitious one, always pushing, always competing, always needing to be the best at everything. Marcus was gentler, more patient. He found joy in simple things. While I was obsessing over grades and achievements, he was building things with his hands, taking apart old machines just to see how they worked. He had our father's gift for construction, that natural understanding of how things fit together. I had our mother's head for numbers and strategy. In many ways, we were the perfect combination to eventually run our father's company together. And for a long time, that was the plan. Our father would say it all the time. Daniel, you will handle the business side. Marcus, you will handle the projects. Together, you boys will take this company further than I ever could. We believed him. We believed in that future. At least I think Marcus did. Looking back now, I wonder if some part of me was always keeping score, always calculating, always waiting for the moment when the numbers would not add up in my favor. Things started to change when I was 28 and Marcus was 25. Our father had been diagnosed with early-onset Parkinson's disease, and while he tried to hide the tremors in his hands, we all knew that his time running the company was coming to an end. He began the process of transitioning leadership, bringing both of us into more senior roles, preparing us for the day when he would step back completely. That was when I first noticed the whispers. Not from Marcus, never from Marcus, but from others in the company, from clients, from partners. Daniel is smart, they would say, but Marcus has the gift. Marcus understands this work in a way that cannot be taught. At first I told myself it did not matter. We were a team. There was no competition. But the whispers grew louder, and so did the voice in my own head. The voice that said I had worked harder, sacrificed more, given up weekends and holidays and relationships to learn every aspect of this business. The voice that said I deserved more. When our father finally announced his retirement, he called both of us into his office for a private conversation. I remember the weight of that moment, the dust particles floating in the afternoon light, the way my father's hands shook as he poured himself a glass of water. He looked at us with so much love, so much pride, and he said the words that would change everything. I am leaving the company to both of you equally. 50-50. You will run it together as partners, as brothers. And then he said something else, something that lodged itself in my brain like a splinter. But if I am being honest, Marcus, you have a natural gift for this work that even I never had. Daniel, you will need to lean on your brother's expertise when it comes to the actual building. Your strength is in the business, and that is important. But the heart of what we do, the actual construction, that is Marcus. He did not mean it as an insult. I know that now. He was simply being honest, trying to help us understand our roles. But in that moment, all I heard was that my father thought my brother was better than me. All I heard was that despite everything I had sacrificed, despite every late night and every spreadsheet and every negotiation I had won, I would always be second. I smiled. I nodded. I hugged my father and told him I was grateful. But something cracked inside me that day, and no matter how hard I tried to repair it, it only grew wider. The legal paperwork took months to complete. My father was meticulous about these things, and he hired a family lawyer named Jonathan Pierce to handle the transition. Jonathan was an old friend of the family, someone our father had known for decades, and he was thorough in documenting every aspect of the inheritance. The company would be split 50-50. Marcus and I would be co-directors. Every major decision would require both of our signatures. It was fair. It was balanced. It was everything that should have satisfied me, but it did not. Because while the paperwork was being finalized, something else was happening. Our largest client, a development firm called Sterling Properties, was negotiating a new contract. It was the biggest deal in our company's history, worth nearly £12 million over 3 years. And Sterling Properties made it very clear that they wanted to work with Marcus. Not with me. Not with Harris Construction as a whole. With Marcus specifically. I sat in that meeting and watched as the representatives from Sterling praised my brother's work, discussed projects he had overseen, and talked about their vision for a partnership with him at the helm. They barely looked at me. When they did, it was with polite dismissiveness. The money man. The one who handles the paperwork. I felt myself shrinking in my chair, becoming invisible in my own father's company. That night, I went home and could not sleep. I lay in bed next to Claire, my wife of 5 years, staring at the ceiling, and I felt something dark taking root in my chest. It was jealousy, but it was also fear. Fear that no matter what I did, I would never be enough. Fear that my brother would always outshine me. Fear that I would spend the rest of my life standing in his shadow. Claire noticed the change in me. She asked if something was wrong, and I told her I was just stressed about the transition. She believed me because she trusted me. Everyone trusted me. I was the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who always did the right thing. No one suspected that I was already beginning to calculate how to take what I believed I deserved. The opportunity came 2 months before my father officially signed the final inheritance documents. Jonathan Pierce called me to discuss some routine paperwork, and during our conversation he mentioned something that made my heart stop. The inheritance documents, he said, had not been finalized. There was still time to make amendments if my father wanted to adjust the terms. I remember the exact moment the idea first entered my mind. I was standing in Jonathan's office, looking at the stack of unsigned documents on his desk, and I thought, what if the terms were different? What if it was not 50-50? What if I got more? I pushed the thought away at first. I told myself I was not that person. But the thought came back. It came back when I watched Marcus receive another round of praise at a client meeting. It came back when I overheard our father telling a friend how proud he was of Marcus's natural talent. It came back every time I felt overlooked, undervalued, invisible, and then I started to plan. I knew that my father's Parkinson's had progressed to the point where his signature was inconsistent. Some days his hands were steady enough to write clearly. Other days the tremors made his handwriting almost illegible. I also knew that Jonathan Pierce was overworked, handling multiple clients, and that he often relied on me to review documents before presenting them to my father. The plan formed slowly, piece by piece, like a puzzle I did not want to complete but could not stop assembling. I would create alternative documents, documents that gave me 70% of the company instead of 50. Documents that reduced Marcus's role to a minority stakeholder with limited decision-making power. I would present these documents to my father on one of his bad days when he was tired and confused, and I would tell him they were the same documents he had already approved. It sounds monstrous when I say it out loud. It was monstrous. But at the time, I convinced myself it was justified. I told myself that I had worked harder, that I understood the business side better, that Marcus did not really care about the money anyway. He just wanted to build things. He would be fine with less control. I told myself so many lies that I started to believe them. The night it happened, I almost did not go through with it. I was driving to my parents' house with the forged documents in my briefcase, and I pulled over on the side of the road 3 times. Each time, I sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, telling myself to turn around, to destroy the documents, to forget I had ever considered this. But each time I saw Marcus's face in my mind and I heard the whispers and I felt the fear and I kept driving. My mother was at a church meeting that evening. My father was alone in his study, and when I walked in, I could see immediately that it was one of his bad days. His hands were shaking badly, and there was a cloudiness in his eyes that broke my heart even as I prepared to betray him. He smiled when he saw me, that same warm smile that had made me feel safe my entire childhood, and he said he was glad I had come. He said he had been thinking about the inheritance and wanted to make sure everything was in order. I sat across from him and opened my briefcase. I took out the documents I had prepared and I explained them to him in a calm, professional voice. I told him these were the same documents Jonathan had drafted, just with some minor clarifications. I pointed to the signature lines and handed him a pen. He looked at me with complete trust. My own father, the man who had built everything from nothing, the man who had taught me to ride a bicycle and helped me with my homework and held me when I cried, looked at me with complete trust and signed away my brother's future. I do not remember driving home that night. I do not remember walking into my house or changing my clothes or lying down in bed. The next thing I remember clearly is waking up the next morning with a crushing weight on my chest, struggling to breathe, and realizing that I had actually done it. I had cheated my brother. I had lied to my father. I had become someone I did not recognize. The weeks that followed were a blur of paperwork and pretense. My father's health declined rapidly after that, and within 2 months he passed away peacefully in his sleep. At his funeral, Marcus stood beside me, his arm around my shoulders, and he told me that at least we had each other. At least we would carry on Dad's legacy together. I nodded and said nothing, because what could I possibly say? The documents had already been filed. The inheritance had already been executed. Marcus believed he owned 50% of the company. He had no idea that I had reduced his share to 30%, stripped him of his decision-making authority, and positioned myself as the sole controlling partner. The truth did not come out immediately. For the first year, Marcus and I continued to work side by side, and he did not question my increasing control over the company. When I made decisions without consulting him, he assumed it was because we were busy, because he trusted my judgment, because we were brothers. When I redirected the Sterling Properties contract to focus on projects I oversaw rather than his, he thought it was a strategic business decision. He never suspected that I was systematically diminishing his role, preparing to push him out entirely. But while Marcus remained oblivious, I was falling apart on the inside. Every night I would lie awake replaying that evening in my father's study. Every morning I would look in the mirror and see a stranger staring back at me. I started drinking more than I should, just to quiet the noise in my head. I became short-tempered with Claire, snapping at her over small things, pulling away when she tried to get close. She asked me what was wrong so many times, and I always gave her the same answer. Work stress. Nothing serious. It will pass. It did not pass. The first crack in my facade appeared about 18 months after my father's death. Marcus called me one afternoon, and his voice was different. Quieter. More serious. He said he had been going through some old files and had found some discrepancies in the inheritance paperwork. He said the numbers did not match what Dad had told him. He asked if I knew anything about it. I lied, of course. I told him there must be a clerical error, that I would look into it. I hung up the phone and immediately called Jonathan Pierce, demanding to know if anyone had accessed the original documents. Jonathan assured me that everything was secure, that no one had questioned the paperwork, that I had nothing to worry about. But I could hear the doubt in his voice. I think even then he suspected something was not right. Marcus let it go for a while. He was dealing with his own challenges. His wife Sarah was pregnant with their first child, and he was focused on preparing for fatherhood. But I knew him better than anyone. I knew that once something lodged itself in his mind, he would not rest until he understood it. It was only a matter of time before he started digging again. And then, exactly 2 years after that night in my father's study, everything began to unravel. It started with Claire. My wife, the woman I had promised to love and cherish, the woman who had stood by me through everything, finally reached her breaking point. We were arguing about something trivial, something I cannot even remember now, when she suddenly stopped mid-sentence and looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. It was not anger. It was not frustration. It was something worse. It was realization. She said, "Daniel, I do not know who you are anymore. You have changed. Something happened, something you are not telling me, and I cannot keep pretending I do not see it." I wanted to tell her. In that moment, I wanted so desperately to confess everything, to let the weight off my chest, to stop carrying this burden alone. But I was too afraid, too ashamed. So I denied it. I told her she was imagining things. I turned the argument around, accused her of being paranoid, and walked out of the house. That was the night I truly lost her. Not legally, not yet, but in every way that mattered. While my marriage was crumbling, Marcus was finally connecting the dots. He had hired his own lawyer, a woman named Patricia Vale, to review the inheritance documents. She found the inconsistencies I had hoped would never be discovered. The dates did not match up. The language was slightly different from Jonathan Pierce's usual drafting style. And most damning of all, she located an earlier draft of the documents, one that clearly showed a 50-50 split. Marcus called me on a Tuesday evening. I was sitting in my office alone, staring at a glass of whiskey I had been nursing for an hour. When I saw his name on my phone, I knew. I knew before I even answered. "Daniel," he said, and his voice was shaking. "Did you change Dad's documents? I could have lied again. I could have denied it, made excuses, bought myself more time. But something in me was exhausted. Something in me could not lie to him anymore." I said nothing for a long moment, and my silence was answer enough. I heard him take a breath on the other end of the line, a shaky, painful breath. And then he said, "I trusted you. I trusted you with everything. You were my brother." He hung up before I could respond, and I sat there in the dark listening to the dial tone, and I felt the full weight of what I had done finally crash down on me. The next few months were chaos. Marcus confronted our mother with the evidence, and I will never forget the look on her face when she called me. It was not anger, it was heartbreak. She said, "I thought I raised you better than this. I thought you knew what family meant." I tried to explain, tried to justify, but there was no justification. I had cheated my brother and lied to my dying father. Nothing I could say would make that acceptable. Claire left me 2 weeks after Marcus discovered the truth. She found out about the forged documents when Marcus came to our house looking for me, and she listened as he explained what I had done. When he left, she packed a bag and told me she needed time to think. She never came back. The divorce papers arrived 3 months later, and I signed them without protest. I had lost any right to fight for her. The legal proceedings that followed were brutal but inevitable. Marcus and his lawyer, Patricia Vale, built an airtight case against me. They located the original documents, found witnesses who remembered my father's stated wishes, and even tracked down a handwriting expert who confirmed that my father's signature on the forged documents showed signs of being obtained under compromised circumstances. Jonathan Pierce, who had always been uncomfortable with how the inheritance was handled, eventually testified about his concerns and the unusual way I had presented the final documents. I could have fought. I could have hired expensive lawyers, dragged the case out for years, made everyone's lives miserable. But what would have been the point? I had done what they said I did. I had cheated my brother. Lying in court would not change that. It would only add another layer of deception to an already unforgivable betrayal. I agreed to a settlement. Marcus would receive his rightful 50% of the company, along with compensation for the profits I had taken during the years I had falsely claimed majority control. The amount was substantial. It wiped out nearly everything I had saved. I also stepped down from my position as managing director, taking a minor consultant role instead. But the legal and financial consequences were nothing compared to what happened to my relationships. My mother, who had always seen the best in me, could barely look at me. When she developed health problems of her own a year later, she chose to stay with Marcus and Sarah rather than accept my help. I would visit her occasionally, sitting in her room while she slept, wondering if she even wanted me there. She never said as much, but I could feel her disappointment radiating off her like heat. She passed away 18 months after the settlement, and at her funeral I stood apart from the rest of the family alone. Marcus did not speak to me for 3 years. 3 years of silence, of unanswered calls, of birthday cards returned unopened. 3 years of waking up every morning and remembering that I had destroyed the one relationship that was supposed to last a lifetime. I had lost my wife. I had lost my mother. I had lost my standing in the business community. But losing my brother was the wound that would not heal. I threw myself into work during those years, but nothing I did felt meaningful. The consultancy projects I took on were hollow. The money I earned meant nothing. I bought a smaller house, sold my expensive car, simplified my life in every possible way. Not because I could not afford more, but because excess felt obscene when I had gained it through such corrupt means. I was living like a man doing penance, though I knew that no amount of self-punishment could undo what I had done. It was during this period that I started seeing a therapist. Her name was Dr. Eleanor Haynes, and she was the first person I told the full truth to without any sugarcoating. I sat in her office, a room with soft lighting and carefully neutral artwork, and I confessed everything. The jealousy, the planning, the forgery, the lies. The look on my father's face when he signed those documents, trusting me completely. I told her all of it, and I did not spare myself. She listened without judgment, which was more than I deserved. And then she asked me a question that I have been thinking about ever since. She said, "Daniel, why do you think you did it?" I gave her the obvious answers at first. I was jealous. I felt undervalued. I was afraid of being in my brother's shadow. But she pushed deeper. She asked about our childhood, about my relationship with my father, about the expectations I had placed on myself. And slowly, painfully, I began to understand something. I had spent my entire life trying to prove that I was enough. Not to my parents, not to my brother, but to myself. Somewhere along the way, I had decided that being loved for who I was not enough. I needed to be the best. I needed to be the most successful. I needed to win. And when I felt that Marcus was winning, something inside me broke. Not because he had done anything wrong, but because I was so desperately afraid of being ordinary. The irony, of course, is that in trying to become extraordinary through cheating, I became the worst version of myself. I became someone my younger self would have been ashamed of. I became the villain. Dr. Haynes helped me see that I could not change the past, but I could choose what kind of person I wanted to be going forward. She encouraged me to write letters to the people I had hurt, even if they never read them. She encouraged me to find ways to give back, to use my skills for something meaningful. She encouraged me to forgive myself, which was the hardest thing of all. I started volunteering with a charity that helped young people from disadvantaged backgrounds get into construction trades. It seemed fitting, given that construction was the foundation of everything my family had built. I would spend weekends mentoring teenagers, teaching them about project management and business basics, watching their faces light up when they completed something with their own hands. It was not redemption, not really, but it was something. And then, 4 years after the settlement, something unexpected happened. I received a phone call from Sarah, Marcus's wife. We had not spoken since before the truth came out, and when I saw her name on my phone, I assumed she was calling to tell me something terrible had happened. My heart was pounding as I answered, but she was not calling with bad news. She was calling because Marcus had been in an accident. A scaffolding collapse at one of the job sites had left my brother with 2 broken legs and a fractured pelvis. He was in hospital, facing months of recovery and rehabilitation. Sarah said she was calling me because, despite everything, she believed Marcus needed his brother. I drove to the hospital immediately. I did not even stop to think about whether Marcus would want to see me. I just went. When I arrived, Sarah met me in the corridor outside his room, and she looked exhausted. She told me that Marcus was stable but in a lot of pain, and that he had been asking about the business, worried about what would happen while he was unable to work. I told her I would handle it. I would step in and manage the projects, make sure nothing fell apart, cover for Marcus however long it took. She looked at me with skepticism, which I deserved, but she nodded and led me to his room. Marcus was lying in bed, tubes and monitors attached to various parts of his body. He looked smaller than I remembered, which seemed impossible. He had always seemed so strong, so capable. When he saw me standing in the doorway, his expression shifted through several emotions. Surprise, wariness, something that might have been pain, either physical or emotional. I walked to his bedside and sat down in the chair next to him. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. Then I spoke. I said, "I am so sorry. For everything. I know I can never make it right, but I am here now, and I will do whatever you need." He looked at me for what felt like an eternity. I could see him weighing his options, deciding whether to trust me again. Finally, he said, "Why should I believe you?" I did not have a good answer. I just said, "Because I am your brother. And because I have spent the last 4 years hating myself for what I did to you." Something shifted in his face then. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something softer. He said, "The business needs someone. Sarah cannot do it alone." I said, "I know. I will take care of it." That was how I found myself back in the offices of Harris Construction, walking the same halls I had walked as a cheater and a liar, trying to prove that I could be something different. The employees were wary of me. Many of them knew what I had done, or at least knew parts of it. I heard the whispers, saw the sideways glances, but I put my head down and did the work. I made sure every project stayed on schedule. I handled the client meetings that Marcus could not attend. I did not try to take credit or position myself for advancement. I simply did what needed to be done. Weeks turned into months. Marcus's recovery was slow and painful, but he was making progress. I would visit him at the rehabilitation center, updating him on the business, asking for his input on decisions. At first, our conversations were stiff and formal, limited to work matters. But gradually, they began to expand. One evening, about 3 months into his recovery, Marcus asked me to stay after our business discussion. He said there was something he needed to know. He asked me if I had ever felt guilty about what I did. I told him the truth. I told him that the guilt had been suffocating me since the moment I walked out of our father's study with those signed documents. I told him about the sleepless nights, the drinking, the failed marriage, the therapy. I told him that not a single day had passed when I did not think about what I had done and wish I could take it back. He listened, and when I finished, he said something that surprised me. He said, "I think I always knew you were jealous. I just never thought you would actually act on it." I asked him why he thought I was jealous, and he said something that cut straight to my heart. He said, "Because you never believed you were enough, Danny. You were so busy trying to prove yourself that you never saw how much everyone already valued you." He was right, of course. He had always been able to see through me better than anyone. I asked him if he could ever forgive me, and he did not answer right away. He thought about it for a long moment, and then he said, "I do not know, but I am willing to try." That was not forgiveness, but it was the beginning of something, a chance, an opening. Over the next year, Marcus and I slowly rebuilt our relationship. It was not the same as it had been before. The trust was damaged, perhaps permanently. There were topics we avoided, memories we did not revisit. But we found ways to work together again. He recovered from his injuries and returned to the business, and I stepped back into a supporting role, content to let him lead. I learned to be okay with not being the center of everything. I learned that there was value in supporting someone else's success and lifting others up rather than climbing over them. It was a lesson I should have learned decades earlier, but better late than never. Today, 5 years after that accident, Marcus and I are not where we were as children. We will never be those innocent brothers again, protecting each other from the world. But we are something new. We are two men who have seen the worst of each other and chosen to keep trying anyway. I still carry the guilt. I do not think it will ever go away completely. What I did was unforgivable, and I understand that. But I have also learned that living with guilt does not mean letting it destroy you. It means using it as a reminder to be better, to choose differently, to honor the people you have hurt by becoming someone worthy of their trust. Claire has moved on. She remarried a few years ago, a kind man who treats her well, and I am genuinely happy for her. She deserves so much better than what I gave her. I think of her sometimes, of the life we might have had if I had not let my jealousy consume me, and I wish her nothing but peace. My mother, I hope, is at peace now too. I like to think that wherever she is, she can see that I have changed, that I am trying to live up to the values she taught me all those years ago. I failed her in life, but I hope I can honor her memory in the time I have left. And Marcus, my brother, the person I hurt most in this world. He told me recently that he is glad I am back in his life. He said his children, my niece and nephew, need to know their uncle. He said family is too important to throw away, even when trust has been broken. I did not deserve those words. I did not deserve his grace. But I received it anyway, and I am grateful beyond measure. If you are listening to this and you are facing a similar temptation, if you are considering betraying someone you love because you feel jealous or afraid or inadequate, please learn from my mistakes. The things you think you want, the success and the power and the recognition, they mean nothing if you lose yourself in the pursuit. They mean nothing if you destroy the people who trusted you. That night, the night I cheated my brother, I thought I was winning. I thought I was finally taking what I deserved. But I was not winning. I was losing everything that mattered. I lost my wife. I lost my mother's respect. I lost years of my brother's life. I lost my own peace of mind, something so precious that I did not even realize I had it until it was gone. I have it back now, partially. Enough to sleep most nights without nightmares. Enough to look in the mirror without hating what I see. But the scars remain, and they always will. That is the real cost of betrayal. Not the legal consequences or the financial penalties, but the scars you carry inside forever. I cheated my brother. I destroyed his trust, betrayed our father's wishes, and almost ruined our entire family. And I spent years drowning in the consequences, isolated and ashamed, unable to escape the weight of what I had done. But here's what I have learned in the years since. Karma is real, but so is redemption. Not the kind where you are absolved of your sins and everything goes back to normal. That is not how life works. Real redemption is quieter. It is showing up every day and trying to be better than you were yesterday. It is accepting that you cannot undo the past, but you can choose to make the future different. It is living with the consequences of your actions while still choosing to move forward. I am not the hero of the story. I never will be. But I am no longer just the villain either. I am something more complicated. I am a man who made terrible choices and is now trying to live with them honestly. To Marcus, if you ever hear this, I want you to know that I love you. I always have, even when I was too consumed by jealousy to show it. You are a better man than I ever was, and I am honored to call you my brother. To anyone listening who has been betrayed by someone they trusted, I hope you find the strength to decide what forgiveness means for you. You do not owe anyone your forgiveness. It is a gift, not an obligation, and only you can decide if you want to give it. And to anyone who has betrayed someone else the way I did, I hope you find the courage to face what you have done. Not to seek absolution, but to take responsibility. The truth will come out eventually, it always does. And when it does, you have a choice. You can continue to lie, to deny, to dig yourself deeper. Or you can stand up, admit what you did, and accept the consequences. I chose the second path. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. Harder even than those sleepless nights when the guilt was crushing me. But it was also the only thing that saved me. The only thing that gave me a chance to rebuild. I lost my peace after that night, and for years I thought it was gone forever. But peace is not something you possess. It is something you practice. Every day I practice honesty. Every day I practice humility. Every day I practice gratitude for the second chance I was given. This is my confession. This is my truth. And this is the promise I make to myself every morning when I wake up. I will never again be the person who walked into my father's study that night with forged documents in his briefcase. I am Daniel Harris. I cheated my brother and lost my peace. And I am spending the rest of my life trying to earn it back. Some nights I still dream about my father. In these dreams, he is healthy again, his hands steady, his mind clear. He stands in his study, surrounded by the awards and photographs that charted his career, and he looks at me with those knowing eyes. Sometimes he is disappointed. Sometimes he is sad. But increasingly, he is something else. He is patient. He is waiting. He is watching to see what I will do next. I wake from these dreams with a sense of quiet determination. My father built something meaningful with his life. He created a company, yes, but more importantly, he created a family. He raised 2 sons and taught them values. I betrayed those values, but I have not abandoned them. Not anymore. Marcus and I had dinner together last month. Just the 2 of us at a restaurant we used to go to with our father when we were teenagers. We ordered the same things we always ordered, sat in the same booth by the window, and we talked. Not about business, not about the past, just about life. He told me about his children's school plays and football matches. I told him about the charity work I have been doing with the young people in construction training. We laughed at old memories, the ones from before everything went wrong, and for a moment, it felt almost normal. At the end of the evening, as we were leaving, Marcus stopped me in the parking lot. He looked at me for a long moment, and then he hugged me. Not a formal, obligatory embrace, but a real hug. The kind we used to share when we were boys. He said, "I am glad you came back." I said, "I am glad you let me." We drove home separately to our separate lives, but something had healed a little more that night. Something was growing back in the space where trust used to be. I know I will carry this story with me for the rest of my life. It is part of who I am now, inseparable from my identity. I am Daniel Harris, the man who cheated his brother. But I am also Daniel Harris, the man who is trying to make things right. The man who shows up for his family. The man who does the work, day after day, to be worthy of the second chance he was given. If there is a lesson in all of this, I think it is this. You are not defined by the worst thing you have ever done. You are defined by what you do next, by the choices you make after you fail, by the person you become when you finally decide to stop running from the truth. I stopped running 5 years ago. I faced the consequences of my actions, accepted the judgment of the people I had hurt, and committed to living differently. It has not been easy. There are days when the shame still threatens to overwhelm me. There are moments when I wonder if I will ever truly feel at peace. But I keep going. I keep showing up. I keep trying. Because that is all any of us can do. We make mistakes, sometimes terrible ones. We hurt the people we love. We fail to live up to our own standards. And then we have a choice. We can let our failures define us, or we can use them as fuel for something better. I chose to use them. I chose to let the pain of what I did transform me into someone who would never do it again. Someone who understands, in the deepest part of his soul, why integrity matters, why trust matters, why family matters. This is my story. It is not a proud story, but it is an honest one. I was jealous, I was afraid, I was weak, and I made choices that caused immense pain to the people I loved most. But I also found my way back, not to the person I was before because that person is gone, but to someone new, someone who carries the weight of his mistakes but does not let them crush him anymore. I cheated my brother and lost my peace after that night, but I found something else in its place. I found the courage to face myself. I found the humility to accept help. I found the strength to keep living, even when living felt impossible. And I found, against all odds, a brother who was willing to give me another chance. That is more than I deserved. It is more than I could have hoped for, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure I never forget it. Thank you for listening to my confession. I hope in some small way it has helped someone who is struggling with their own demons. We are all capable of terrible things, but we are also capable of change, of growth, of redemption. Choose growth. Choose honesty. Choose the people you love over the things you want. Because in the end, when everything else is stripped away, the only thing that matters is how we treat each other. I learned that lesson too late, but I learned it. And I pray that whoever hears these words learns it before they have to feel the weight of the regret that I carry every single day. This is Daniel Harris, signing off. And if my brother is listening, I just want to say one more time. I love you, Marcus. I am sorry. And I am grateful on every single day that you let me back into your life. That night changed everything. But what we build from here, that is up to us. And I choose to build something worth living for